Today, I have with me a guest who has quite a bit of expertise in exercise physiology and nutrition, and I am really excited to bring him to you, the listeners. Dr. Jim Stoppani is a leading authority in the field of fitness, nutrition, and dietary supplements with over 2 decades of expertise as an academic and a practitioner. He holds a PhD in exercise physiology from the University of Connecticut. Dr. Stoppani was on the editorial staff at Weider Publications for 11 years, serving as senior science editor for Muscle and Fitness, Flex, and Muscle and Fitness Hers magazines. Dr. Stoppani has authored and co-authored several books, including the Encyclopedia of Muscle and Strength, and has been the nutrition and health consultant for numerous celebrity clients, including LL Cool J, Dr. Dre, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and Mario Lopez. His fitness website, jimstoppani.com, serves as a complete resource for fitness enthusiasts seeking expert guidance. He offers several transformative workout programs, including the famed Shortcut to Shred and insight into personalized nutrition. As founder and owner of JYM Supplement Science, Dr. Stoppani offers a line of top tier health and performance supplements formulated to complement his workout and nutrition programs. Dr. Stoppani, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carol. Pleasure to be here.
I was thinking as I was reading your bio and speaking with you earlier, because we were talking about the changes in the industry, the fitness industry specifically, you must have seen a lot of changes over the past 2 decades. Obviously, there's the things like social media, but what else has really changed in the industry in your view?
Yeah, it's wow. Thinking back 20 years or more, not to date me too much, but when I started giving fitness advice, there was just a handful of us doing it, and it was mainly through written publications, magazines and books. So print media was really the way and the only way that people got information on fitness. If you wanted to learn how to do a bench press, you'd go to the newsstand and pick up the new Muscle and Fitness, or Muscular Development, or Iron Man, one of those fitness magazines, or you'd have to go buy a book. Like you mentioned, my Encyclopedia of Muscle and Strength. There's many of other great books out there, like Arnold's Encyclopedia, as well, Arnold Schwarzenegger's, to learn, how to exercise, how to work out. Um, and then along came the internet. So when I was at Weider Publications, as you mentioned, that was the main way that, and people forget about this. This is back at around 2000, just the start of 2000. The muscle fitness magazines were read by over 40 million people around the world. They were published in every country, or at least most countries around the world. So that was one of the main major ways that people really got their fitness information. And as being the senior science editor, I was giving, workout advice and workouts and nutrition tips and supplement advice and whatnot. So it was a great platform, and really one of the only platforms, which is really hard to really think about, that, we couldn't pick up our phones and just get information. And then along came, like I said, the internet. And so when the internet happened, I was still at Muscle and Fitness magazines. And what's interesting is the executives, the higher up, the publishers and all that, they really thought that the internet was going to cannibalize the magazines. And as an educator, as we talked about before, that's my number. The only reason I do this is I'm an educator. And, one of the things that I was taught during my doctoral work was that you've learned information that a lot of people do not have, and so your responsibility, we were told, is to share that information with other people as much as you can, who will ever listen to you. And so I really sought that out as a way to bridge the gap. I started as a hardcore scientist. After UConn, I was a postdoc research fellow at Yale School of Medicine, Department of Cellular Molecular Physiology, and I was studying how exercise and nutrition affect genes. And so, and not like genes for eye color and whatnot, but your genes you produce proteins that you use every day. If you go on a low carb diet or a high carb diet, right, the enzymes that you need to break down those carbs change, and that's all regulated by your genes. So when you go on a low carb diet, you may shut off certain genes that break down carbohydrates, and then when you start eating carbs again, you have to ramp those up. That's all through gene activation. But anyway, I was doing this research and was an award-winning research scientist, um, like I said, at Yale. But what I saw was a better way to teach people what was happening in the lab, what we were discovering, and then how to apply that. Because a lot of my colleagues weren't doing that. If you ask a scientist, oh, you did a study, you found that broccoli reduced the risk of cancer. Would you suggest eating more broccoli? And most scientists would be like, oh, no, 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 we're not saying that you should eat more broccoli. We're just saying we found a correlation. And, I got really tired of that nonsense, because it's like, what is the point of all this research if it's not going to directly help people? And of course, we can't take one study and sort of say, oh, well, this means the world to us. We have to repeat that and show it, and the science changes. But I really saw the internet as a great way to sort of introduce the lay public, the regular person, to what's going on in the lab. And I sort of give the comparison of how trying to teach somebody how to tie their shoe. Would you rather teach them with a print magazine with words and photos of how to tie your shoe? It's a very complicated thing when you don't know how to tie your shoe. I have an 11-year-old who's literally been struggling, most of his life, and when he finally can do it. But again, I think about, how do you teach somebody? And a video format would be far better to teach somebody. And so I saw that as a better way to educate people on weightlifting, teach them how to bench press, where they tuck their elbows, where to grab the bar. It's much easier with video. So as soon as the internet sort of got popular, I saw it as a way to teach people as a better format. And like I said, the magazines were very against that. And so I started working with bodybuilding.com. And again, talking about Muscle and Fitness Magazine and bodybuilding.com, this is going back almost 20 years now. These names don't mean much to anybody, but there was a time in the mid 2000s, probably around 2006, 7, closer to 2000, where bodybuilding.com was the major way everybody learned how to do a bench press, how to do a workout, how to eat properly. They would go on and use that website. Today, you don't really pick up print publications, that much. You don't even, if you have a question, you may Google, but a lot of times you just pick up your phone and you're just bombarded with information, right? And so, if you're a person who goes to TikTok or Instagram and looks at a lot of fitness stuff, that's what's going to be in your feed. And so today, I think the problem with social media is it's sort of given people, like attention deficit disorder. They expect, and I see this in my 11-year-old, like we used to go to the movies, and things like, Disney and Pixar movies were, he loved them. Now with watching YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, that attention span has sort of shortened. And I know I'm kind of going many rants here on a very simple question about what's changed. I apologize, Carol, eh, but you see this sort of, people don't even like. Again, I'm not saying it never happens where you go, oh, how do I take creatine? Let me Google that. But typically you're so bombarded on what's appearing in your phone as soon as you pick it up that you don't even have the time to think of those questions, but you're getting a lot of, you may see, hey, here's how to take creatine, here's how to do a bench press. Should you do intermittent fasting? Should you do keto? It's all right there as soon as you pick up your phone. And so that's amazing in many, many ways, because you can learn so much. However, like I said, the problems are that it causes a bit of attention deficit disorder. People are just like, next, 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 and even the way we do videos. I used to do a video like, "Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Stoppani from Muscle and Fitness Magazine, and today we're going to teach you." That right there, you're already lost. Nobody's going to listen to that, and so now you really have to, those first 5 seconds or even in less, you have to get them right away. What is the point of this video? What are you going to learn? Because they're just going to swipe on to the next thing. And so, that's, I see, one of the issues with social media. And the other thing is, you know, like I said, when I started, there was very few of us doing it, and we were all, you know, either advanced, PhDs, masters, certified trainers. Now, a 16-year-old who just is, good looking and has a decent body and has a phone can have 10 million viewers, and he's teaching them how to exercise, which is, like I said, this is, great. And I really appreciate the desire to reach out and help people, but a lot of times the information is hurtful versus helpful. It's, incorrect information. And so, yes, a lot has changed. It brings a lot of good, and of course, it's balanced with a lot of bad. But sorry
Mhm.
for the 30-minute answer.
No, no, you summed that up really well, because I could not agree more having seen the changes. I agree with you on it. It is affecting our attention span, the young people especially, but adults too.
Yeah,
I
of
know
course.
yeah, I've
Yes.
had to force myself to step back, especially after the pandemic, when kind of being shut up in the house and spending more time on social media, force myself to get back into actual written books that I hold that are on an electronic device, actually writing things out pen to paper rather than typing everything, and forcing that deeper thought
Yeah,
process.
exactly.
But yeah, I agree
And
too.
right. And I forgot my point. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. No, you're fine. And I agree too. You have to catch somebody's interest so quickly. You should see
Right.
me editing, trying to do one little clip, and I'm just cutting it down, and going, "Oh, but this is all so good. What do I, what do I cut
Yeah, yeah.
out?"
The thing I was going to say is, what was great about when it was uh, published print, you had to go through a filtering process. You had to go. There were checks and balances. You had other experts going, "Oh, let's read what he wrote about how to do this. Oh, is that really correct? Does this hold up to the science?" Before that information got to the public, it was vetted by some other expert. Now it's just like, "Oh, I've got an idea on the bench press. I'm, 15 years old. I thought this would be a great, but I'm going to make a video. Oh, there it is." And now it's literally out there. There's no, nobody is reviewing it. Nobody is checking it for accuracy. And, that's sort of the thing that was lost. But again, you can also complain. You can also argue that, well, it allows the people to choose who they want to listen to. Do you know what I mean? I mean, good or bad. It's why we have Justin Bieber. It was YouTube. If Justin Bieber had to go through, the typical record deals, we may not even know who he is today. To think, and again, whether you like Justin Bieber or not, that could be good or bad, but that sort of that YouTube, and those sort of those platforms allow the audience to make their decision. Now, again, you can argue, is the audience really um, do they have the expertise to decide? But like I said, you can argue either way. There's good and bad on both of those.
Oh, most definitely. And I see there's a lot of false information that circulates around, things that can hurt people. And then a lot of, this is the one way. And from working with clients, there is no one way. There's a lot of bio individuality, and what works for
Exactly.
one may not work for
Precisely.
another. And you have
Mm, mm,
outliers that
yep.
defy all all
Right.
logic,
All,
scientific and
all,
medical.
all logic.
So that's the side of it that bothers me. I know when I do exercise videos, I don't do them very often anymore. I think, oh, this is so boring, because the things that work are the basics.
Yes.
And what I see is a lot of, I call them YouTube spectaculars, where somebody is just trying to
Yeah.
entertain,
Get the views. Right. And get views.
and maybe the exercise isn't safe or it's not effective, things such as that. And I see people acting it out at the gym, having their phone and doing these crazy things at the gym. So
Right.
good and bad. Shifting gears a little bit, you were talking about the magazines and print, and I did bodybuilding shows for 10 years, bikini bodybuilding and figure in the beginning, until it the division changed. And I
Sure.
remember I first got that interest being 35, standing in line at the grocery store, seeing a glossy magazine going, wow, could I actually do this? And thinking, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. And then fast forward, 50 years old going, okay, I'm going to do it. Kids are, getting a little older. I'm going to do it now. You look like a bodybuilder competitor. Have you ever competed?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. That's uh, my whole interest in science was because of bodybuilding. My father worked out, all the time. Fitness has been a big part of my family on both sides. My father's father was a professional boxer, and on my mother's side, she had a cousin who was on the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team back in the '60s. So physical culture is in sport and exercise is huge in my family. And one of the things that I've always said to people is I've heard people who would be harassed by their parents why they're wasting time working out. There's more important things to do than working out. And it was so foreign to me because the importance of working out and eating properly was really my parents modeled that for me ever since I was a young kid. So I wanted to hang out with my dad. He was down in the basement lifting weights. I started working out with him and just took to it. And I started competing as a teenager. I competed in in amateur level, not professional. Since I've never competed professionally, I competed only amateurly. But I started, at 18 as a teenager competing in, teenage bodybuilding contests. I lived in Connecticut at the time, so Mr. Connecticut, those NPC shows, I did the collegiate nationals as well, a few times at junior USA's. So yeah, I competed at the national level in bodybuilding while I was going through school. So I was taking what I was learning in school and in the lab and applying it to the gym. But with bodybuilding, you can only go so far before you know what you have to do to really take it to the professional level. And that just was something that I really didn't see as a healthy future with the knowledge that I had about the human body. And so instead of, continuing and becoming, professional Mr. Olympia, I sort of gravitated towards the science aspect of it. And that's the thing that I try to remind people, like on TikTok, you'll get a lot of, nastiness. Like you said, you look like a bodybuilder. Um, but a lot of people will say, well, geez, you're showing me how to do a back exercise, but your back isn't that impressive. Derek Lunsford or Jay Cutler has a much better back. And it's like, I try to remind them, look, sure, you can look at me as a bodybuilder because I have some muscular development, but I'm really a scientist. I'm teaching you the nuances and the science of here. So don't be listening to me because of how I look. You know, you should consider listening to me because of the knowledge that I've gained over the years and the people that I've worked with. And, it's not just about the science, but also applying it in the actual gym. There's a real difference between what we find in the lab and what we find in the real world. And that's, one of the things I really hang my hat on is that you can't just take a single study and go, oh, they did a study and they showed that this is what happens when you do this or that, right? And it's one study, which is fine. It gives us sort of an inkling of what's going on. But until we really show in the real world that that can work for people, then it doesn't always hold true what works in the lab. Same thing for what people are doing in the gym. Some of the research may show, well, that doesn't really work, you know, going wider on the leg press or how, those sorts of things. Um, but anyway, yeah. So I'll stop talking. I tend to rant on and on about all these other
No,
topics.
it's all very interesting. And I think you were touching on something, you hear about bro science, which is more of
Yes.
the traditional, bodybuilder competing type of suggestions for diet and exercise. And then, of course, there's the research, everything based on the studies. And I think that the reality kind of comes somewhere in between. Do you see the same thing?
Yeah. Like fasted cardio, for example.
Mm,
Everybody
yeah.
fasted cardio. It's the best way to lose body fat. And it's like, well, yes, acutely speaking, if you look at doing exercise while you're fasted versus being fed, you will burn more fat during that workout. However, does that lead to more fat loss over time? And what the research suggests is no. While it may burn more fat during the workout, what then happens is after the workout is over, you're not burning as much fat because the body wants to sort of store and hold on to what it's using during exercise. So when you're done exercising and recovering, your body is recovering and using what it's not going to use for the next workout. So if you're burning more fat in your workouts, then during your recovery, you're going to be burning more carbohydrates for recovery, not fat. However, if you went in and did, say, a high intensity interval training workout, you'd burn more carbohydrates during that workout. However, after the workout is over, you would be burning more fat. And so, there's things like that where it's like, well, with fasted cardio, is it that beneficial? And some people swear by it. I have, competitors who swear by it and they need to do it. That's how they get the last percentage of body fat. And it's like, okay, sure. For the average person, do you need to worry about fasted cardio? No, just do some cardio, right? It doesn't matter if you're fasted or not. Get the exercise in. If you're trying to step on stage and you've got a little bit of, and you, sure, maybe fasted cardio might help you there. And so, like you said, it's really interesting seeing, what works in the lab, what works in the gym are sort of sometimes two different things. But even then, when you see something that doesn't work in the lab, if it's working for an individual, y- like who cares about what the study says? If it's working for that person, it's working for that person, and that one of the things that I always remind people is that, yes, I'm a scientist, but my job is to get you results. And, it doesn't matter what the theory is, what the mechanism is. If you're getting those results, that's ultimately what the goal is.
I agree because you have those little things in bodybuilding, like eat every 2 hours to rev up your metabolism.
Right.
But then the science is saying something different, and it can be really confusing. I know I was confused by it, having lived that way for 10 years, eating 6, 7 meals a day, and then going more to an intermittent fasting
Yes.
routine.
Yes. Because
Well,
we used to think the
yeah,
thermic effect of food, right? When you eat something, particularly protein, right, it ramps up your metabolism. Um, and like I said, protein ramps it up even more than carbs and fat. So the old thinking, and this is not like this isn't even bro science. This was science saying you're probably better off eating more frequent meals because then you'll get more of that, the thermic effect of food, the TEF, and over time, right, throughout the day, you'll be burning more calories. Turns out not so true. And the same thing with intermittent fasting. If you go back 20 years and told somebody to fast, what would they tell you? That's going to slow down your metabolism.
mhm.
Yes. And I'm not talking bro science here, even. This is scientists saying you shouldn't fast. That'll slow your metabolism. You won't lose any weight. Um, and while I was at Yale School of Medicine, we actually did research on intermittent fasting to find out what's going on with the genes. And there's certain uncoupling proteins that get increased with intermittent fasting, but um, it it does not slow down your metabolism. If anything, it actually increases, boosts your metabolism.
So you are a proponent of intermittent fasting?
Well, it depends on the goal. If you're a bodybuilder who wants to someday step on the Olympia stage, the ultimate bodybuilding title, I don't know a single pro bodybuilder who does intermittent fasting. You would lose too much muscle during the fasting periods, right? During that fasting period, you're breaking down muscle tissue. You're breaking down to get those amino acids converting into the glucose because you're not eating. So there's no way to prevent muscle breakdown with intermittent fasting. However, if you want to lose body fat and are interested in maximizing or optimizing your health, then I would consider intermittent fasting. And when we get to fat loss, let's sort of specify here. It depends on the person too. If you're the type of person who needs that sort of control, because what I find with intermittent fasting for a lot of people is it's the difference between, like, let's take a low carb diet and an intermittent fasting diet, right? With a low carb diet, you wake up in the morning, you're driving to work, you stop at Starbucks, you're standing in line, and you're just getting a black coffee because you want to keep your calories down and your sugar down, and you're looking at that banana bread or the pumpkin loaf, and you're like, okay, if I order the pumpkin loaf now and have it for breakfast, then I won't have rice with my lunch. And you're doing this mental like math all day long. You're constantly thinking about what can I eat, what can I not, what should I do? Should I do with intermittent fasting? You walk into Starbucks, right? If it's not in your feeding window and you're like, "Ooh, that bread looks good," it's just like, no, it's not my time to eat. It's either yes or no. And so a lot of people find that sort of takes the control away. It's like it's built-in control for them. It's very easy to just go, nope, it's not my time to eat. And so that helps a lot of people, regardless of whether or not intermittent fasting boosts your metabolism better than keto or carb cycling or you know what diet plan you have. So we can all argue whether it's calories in, calories out, whether the carbs matter, the fat matters, the protein matters, but really at the end of the day it really is about calories. And it's finding, like you said, the individualized advice and prescription for that person, what works better for them. It doesn't matter what the science says. If you claim that intermittent fasting, if I was a huge proponent, which I'm a proponent of intermittent fasting, but if I was saying everybody should do intermittent fasting, that it doesn't work for it. Not everybody can do that. They can't go 16 hours or whatever, or a 24-hour fast and comfortably do that. So it doesn't work for everybody, but if it does, then great.
Agreed. I work with women over 40 and 50, and I find there's a lot of what I call toggling the switch. Like maybe there's times where intermittent fasting works beautifully, and then there's times I'll tell a client, you know what, let's step back from this. Let's eat a little
Yep.
bit more frequently. Make sure you're getting your protein in. And it's based on like energy and sleep, hormones, so many different factors. And even with
How you
myself,
feeling? Yep.
yeah, I typically can do 12 without a problem, but the 16, I don't do that every day. I go by what type of workout I'm doing, how I'm feeling. If I had a terrible night's sleep, I'm going to break that fast a
Yes.
lot
I'm
earlier.
I'm the same way. That's funny that you say that. Some days I'll do 16 or more. Other days it'll be 12. Some days it's fewer than 12. But what the research shows, that's what's nice, is I try to get most people to do 12. If you're interested in building muscle and health, then what I recommend is a 12-hour fast, 12 and 12, 12 hours of fasting, 12 hours of feeding. You're not fasting so long that you're breaking down huge amounts of muscle. And then you have 12 hours of feeding where you're going to rebuild but like you said, I like to play with it because I'm interested in maintaining muscle. I'm 56, so am I going to build more muscle at this age? Probably not. It's really about maintaining. But I'm 56, so I really need to focus on my health. So I have days where I'll do 16, even 20 hours of fasting, but then I have days where I'm focused more on building muscle, and I'll either do a 12 or even fewer fast.
Yes, I think people get very rigid in their thinking and they think, okay,
Yes.
I've got to do it this way all the time, and everybody has to do the same thing I'm doing. And the reality is so much different. And you were talking about competing, not doing the longer fast during competing. And I found that to be true because I started intermittent fasting, oh, it was probably early 2021, and I was still competing at that time.
Well,
And when
yep.
I would go into a prep, I would totally drop the fasting. I would do 12 hours, but I would drop the longer
Yes.
fasts.
Yep. We're on the
Now,
same page.
what about protein? There are so many different ideas about how much protein to eat. I'm in a camp of we need more, not less, as we get older. And most women that come to me, I find they're not eating near enough protein. And if I can
Probably
just
not
bring that up,
at
it
40
makes a
and
big
50.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things we know, scientifically speaking, is that if you compare a 20-year-old to a 50-year-old, the 20-year-old could eat 20 or 30 grams of protein and see a spike in what we call muscle protein synthesis, right? That just means that they're taking amino acids and stringing them together to make proteins that are going to go for the, muscle, build the muscle up. So a 20-year-old has no problem 20 to 30 grams of protein. A 50-year-old, if they only ate 20 or 30, they would they would probably see half the spike in that muscle protein. That it takes far more protein for an older individual to get that spike in muscle protein synthesis. So yes, an older individual needs to eat more protein if their goal is muscle building. And most people's goal at 40 or 50 should be not necessarily muscle building, but at least muscle maintenance, right? Because as we age, right, quality of life is, there's, a linear correlation between muscle mass and your quality of life. So as we get older, we lose muscle mass, particularly the fast twitch muscle fibers, and that is what reduces our quality of life along with the decrease in mobility. How many 50-year-olds can't even get under their bed and get something out and then get back up, right? So mobility, and like I said, making sure that you have enough muscle mass. So yes, I'm a firm believer in older individuals eating more protein, right, so that they can maintain more muscle as they get older. But also what we were talking about with diets and whatnot, eating more protein tends to help, what the research is showing, and again, calories in versus calories out, but there is sort of a trend to see that those who are eating higher protein have less issues with gaining weight as they get older.
I would agree with that just based on what I've seen and what I've experienced with myself. Because in my 40s, I was all about my idea of protein was a peanut butter sandwich
Right.
or grilled
Yeah.
cheese, and I would eat a grilled cheese I was a runner, so I'd go out and do all this running for my marathons and was breaking down my muscle unknowingly and looking worse and worse the closer I got to 50, not better and better. And that's when I picked up weights, and that's when I talked to a coach and increased my protein and really saw my body change dramatically from that kind of
Yes.
skinny fat
Yes.
runner
With the
to, yeah, a
more
lean
resistance
muscle.
training, more, protein. And what's really interesting is, like, if you look at American College of Sports Medicine's, their guidelines for exercise used to if you go back 20 years, it never mentioned resistance training, and then and then went from, at least 3 times a week of, cardiovascular exercise, endurance, some form of endurance training. Then they said, and, you should consider, and now there's specific resistance exercise recommendations by the American College of Sports Medicine. And, like you said, I've been doing this a long time. So when I started in exercise science, even before I was, working for the magazines and working with the general public, there was a time when you would go to American College of Sports Medicine conference and nobody was talking about lifting. It was all about cardio. That's all it was. We knew so little about the importance of resistance. We all thought exercise was about cardio, and now it's, thankfully, um, like you said, I used to work for the Weider publications. For those who probably don't know who Joe Weider was, he was someone back in the 60s, 1960s, telling people that in the future, ex- weightlifting will be a, will be a, something that the general public does. It'll be part of their daily life because it's a critical component of health. And people were laughing. There was a time when coaches wouldn't even let athletes lift weights because they thought that they would get muscle bound and it would reduce their mobility and their flexibility. So it's funny to think about how far we've come with the knowledge of how resistance training, how important it is for our health.
So important. I'm constantly preaching it. And when I was a personal trainer, I was a personal trainer for many years. I would get tennis players and golfers and all kinds of different sports, and I would find that their game would improve as long as my programming was on point with their goals. Their game, their power, their speed would greatly improve with strength
Yeah,
training.
even in endurance athletes and runners, they've shown that not just going in and lift, you'd think that, okay, they used to think, okay, if you're an endurance, let's take in a marathon runner, right? They probably don't do a lot of resistance training. If they did, excuse me, they should probably be doing 20 or 30 reps, right? Because they're endurance. Wrong. What they found was that when they took endurance athletes and put them on a fairly heavy resistance training program, fairly heavy. We're talking, like 6 to 8, 8 to 10, and that not the 20, not even 15 heavier reps on the lower rep range. Their running improved dramatically.
I believe it being a marathon runner because I kind of had that crossover where I decided, okay, something's wrong. I need to do something, hired a trainer, started picking up the weights, and especially with my legs and core, it almost felt like in certain races, like I was just floating. I had so much strength and power. I wasn't hunched over by the end of the race, and I started placing much better and winning quite a few of those races. And I do think it was the strength training that made the difference for me.
Sure, and probably the increase in protein. Another thing that a lot of runners mistake, and they think it's all about carbs. Certainly, carbs are critical, especially if you're a long distance runner, particularly right before an event. But generally speaking, runners need protein just like a body, maybe not to the same extent, but they need a higher protein intake as well because you're getting muscle. With running, when you land, that's a negative, a rep essentially, that right, that's eccentric. You're landing, and that causes muscle damage, especially when you're doing that thousands and thousands of times in a run. And so runners, sure, you need to go and have the pasta and the banana and to replenish the glycogen that you burn during the run, but very importantly, you also need the protein to rebuild the muscle that you broke down. Or, like you said, you're going to be hunched over at the end, right? Your
Yes.
muscles are going to be fatigued. They're not going to be able to support you. They're not going to have the endurance as well as the strength.
Yes, I would be completely hunched over by the end of those marathons. My shoulders would be so sore, my upper back, I just would just be completely depleted. Now, you touched on the rep range. What are your thoughts? That's another thing that I see, high rep, low rep, circuits, straight sets. What is your philosophy with training?
So, my philosophy is really goal specific. It's about training for you. What are your goals? If you want to compete in powerlifting, uh, can you incorporate some 20 and 30 rep ranges? Yes, but what should you be focusing on more? Lower rep ranges for a strength athlete. And we even talked about runners, right? Runners, you would think that they'd be doing all high reps if they're lifting weights and on top of the running, but we find that some heavy training can also help. So I'm really about, first of all, your goals, but also changing it up, frequently changing it up. So for example, like I said, with a power lifter, a lot of people think powerlifters who do, one rep max in the bench press, how much can they, that's what they do in the gym, right? Training specificity, as we call it. What are you going to compete at? What do you do in the gym, right? Well, most powerlifters never do one rep maxes outside of competition. They do more reps. And so what was discovered was that if they incorporate more higher rep training along with the lower rep training, they see better gains in muscle strength. And then the same with bodybuilders, right? With a bodybuilder, you've competed before. Most bodybuilders work out in that 8 to 12, maybe 15
Mhm.
rep range, somewhere around that. But what we found is that if we incorporate some lower rep ranges, right, in a periodized plan, that's the other thing. I'm a firm believer in periodization, making sure that you're, changing it up over time. Um, can really benefit people. So what the research basically says is that if your goal is muscle building, it may not matter what your rep range is, as long as you go maybe close to failure, right? Muscle failure, a few reps before, as long as it's really about fatigue for muscle growth, not for strength training though. For muscle growth, it's more about creating fatigue because it changes the environment of those muscle cells, and that instigates things like growth factors that get released that are important for muscle growth. Um, with a with a with a strength trainer, however, on the other, you're going for strength, right? Then, like I said, more lower rep ranges. But generally speaking, what the research shows is that they've compared, a set of like 4 reps to a set of 30 reps for what we talked about, that muscle protein synthesis, which is basically your sort of acute look at how is the muscle growing, right? And what they found was it didn't matter if they were doing a weight that they could only lift for 4 reps or a weight that they could lift for 30 reps. The muscle protein synthesis response was similar as long as they reached a similar fatigue, right? They were, just about close to fatigue on that last rep. So I'm a firm believer, like I said, focusing on your goals, but periodizing it and changing it up. So, do I think a bodybuilder can utilize lower reps, 3 to 5 reps? Yes. Do I think a powerlifter can utilize higher reps, even up to 20, 30? Yes. In a periodized plan, that shouldn't be their focus, but you need to sort of change it up. And the other thing that I like about change is that for the general population who isn't trying to maximize strength, isn't trying to maximize muscle growth. They just want to look better and feel better and be healthier. That change in their rep range in the program makes the program less boring. You have something to look forward
Yes.
to, like with a microcycle program where you're doing maybe 12 to 15 reps one week, then you're down to 8 to 10 in another week, then you're down to 4 to 6 in another week, then you go back, something like that. Most people like having those changes because they have something to look forward to. Oh, now I'm going to go into my heavier. Let me see how much weight I can lift. Oh, now we're going back to the lighter weight. Now my joints can take a break. You know what I mean? And so it makes the training less boring. Let's face it, most people, other than you, me, and other people in the fitness industry, walking into the gym, doing an exercise, resting 60, 120 seconds, going back and doing that's pretty boring, to be honest, right? Unless you really love it, right? I love it. It's not
Hmm.
boring to me, but from what I'm told, it's pretty boring for a lot of people. And so having those changes in the rep range versus just doing 8 to 10, 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 you know, takes away some of that boredom and makes it a little more interesting for people, and they're more consistent when they have something to look forward to. At least that's what I find.
I find the same thing, and I do use circuits, even though I've heard, oh no, circuits aren't effective. But in my mind, I just want them picking up the weights any way
Yes.
I can get, any way I can get that
Yeah.
outcome. And most of the women
I
I
mean,
work with
you
would
defined
be bored with
effective.
that.
You know what I mean? Like
Right,
define
right.
what effective is. And the other thing that what's interesting as a scientist is if you compare, let's say, one style of workout to another style of workout, and then the study says, well, this style was better, that's not really true because like I said, you need to have a period. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you're going to stagnate eventually, right? You need to produce a different type of stress in the muscle for it to continue making progress. So if you're constantly doing that same, workout program, and then you compare these two workout programs in a study, it, let's say it's supersets, right? Where you're doing one exercise, then immediately going to another exercise, or straight sets where you're doing an exercise and resting for 2 to 3 minutes. If you compare those two workouts and tell me that one is better than the other, I say BS because a workout program is only as effective as it can be based on where that person is in their training. If that person has been doing straight sets for the last 3 years, and then you put them on a superset program, they're probably going to see some change in progress. However, if they've always been doing supersets and then you put them on a straight set program, again, they're probably going to see some progress. So, I don't get too caught up in, oh, this study showed that pre-exhaust doesn't work as well as blah, blah, or supersets work better than, circuits don't work as well as like BS. It's about the individual. It's about where they are in their training, and so that that's the thing that a lot of people who aren't true scientists don't really understand. They read a study and they go, "Oh, look, they just proved that." straight sets are better. And it's just like, it doesn't really work that way. Um, and like you said, you have individualized things. What's going to keep that person consistent with their training? Because consistency produces results, not a style of training, right? The consistency is most important. And so if circuits are going to make it more fun for somebody and keep them consistent, then I argue that that's a better workout program for that person than if they were doing straight sets with a rest period in between.
Yes, and many people just need to get moving, and circuits can be such a great way. Like they sit at a
Such a
desk
great,
all day, and
such a
yeah,
great.
they need to get their heart rate up a little bit. They need to move, and but they're limited on time. And so I use them quite a bit with the ladies that I work with. Now, when somebody comes to you and they want to work with you, how are you working with clients now? Are you working with them on nutrition, supplements, training plans, all of the above?
So I work with very few people on sort of an individualized. It's really through my website and my app. So I have an app where I literally have hundreds of workout programs. You can go there, get the workout that you want to do, and then you can reach out to me on social media. So that's really how people work with me, right? And so instead of paying, a trainer hundreds of dollars, you know, my website is somewhere around $14 a month. So for $14 a month, and again, I'm not trying to sell anybody, just just explaining to you, you get the workouts, but then you also, you can't call me or text me directly, right? It's not like, but I'm very, very active on social media. Answer, I mean, that's why I started social media. I found it as a great way to answer people's questions. And so it's a great way for the members to be able to reach out. I can post a video on a barbell curl, but somebody has a question about the bench press or one of my nutrition plans. Right there under the barbell curl, hey, I've got a question on, great, here's your answer. And so that's how I mainly work with people today. Mostly through the app and using social media, which is one of the, we talked about social media, the goods and the bads. That's one of the great things about social media, is that I can help answer all these questions in one in or several places: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter. So I love being able to help people that way.
And nutrition, do you work with anyone on nutrition through the app or
Same thing. Yep. Same thing through the app. And then any specific questions you have, you just hit me up on social media.
that's a great way to do it. I personally love apps. I worked with coaches for many, many years, and now that I'm not competing, I haven't really felt the need to hire somebody, but I love just having something at my fingertips, go to the gym, and then it gives you that variety. Like maybe you didn't think
Yeah.
of pairing exercises a certain way. It kind of, because I know I can get in a rut sometimes where I just do the same things in the same order. And if I'm doing someone else's program, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't think to do it that way.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yep. And you're a fitness expert. Like you said, can you imagine the average person? They tend to almost always fall into that same rut of just doing the same thing. I go in and I do the bench press for 3 sets of 8 to 10. And then I do, like for years.
Yeah, I had
I
a
do that
client,
same
and
thing.
all she would do was cable bicep curls until she started working with me. I would see her in the gym, and I'm like, "Does she do?" It was the treadmill and cable bicep curls. It was because it was the only thing she
She knew
really
how to
knew how
do,
to do. And
right?
people get embarrassed. They don't want to look. I was like that in the
Yeah, they
beginning.
don't want to look foolish, like, I'm not saying everybody's looking at you, but you're in a place where people can see what you're doing. And if you're not comfortable with what you're doing, it's like going to a dinner party and you've never been told, which fork to use. And, you know what I mean? And it's, all eyes feel at least on you, and you feel very self conscious. And you tend to stick with what you know, or at least what you think and it leaves room for very little variety, unfortunately.
That's true. And with women, I found it's mostly cardio they'll revert back to because they're comfortable with that. Women generally enjoy cardio, I think, more than men and the classes and all that. So they'll revert back to that rather than trying some of the machines or hiring, a trainer to show them. But yeah, I remember those days. And when I first started lifting, there weren't many women in the section of the gym with the
Right.
barbells, dumbbells, and plate loaded machines. It was intimidating for me.
Yeah, it's almost like the gym was the women's section was over here at the cardio, right?
Hmm.
Oftentimes like fenced off a little, you know what I mean? It would be up on a
Yes,
platform or you know what I mean? And then you have the floor where all the men are lifting the weights and you know what I mean? It's really silly to think about now in today's world. Um, you know?
it is. It is. That's one of those good changes, having
Yes,
women pick up
agreed.
the weights. Yeah, and
Definitely
younger,
agree.
younger too. I see
Yes.
a lot of young women now, which I did not see before. So that's fabulous. Now, I want to be respectful of your time. And as we start to wrap up, is there something I didn't mention or ask you? And how can the listeners find out about your app and how to sign up with you?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would like to remind everybody on is that your workout, unfortunately, isn't enough to stay healthy. And by that, I mean, if you commute to work and you sit in the car for 30 to 60 minutes going to work, then you get to your office job and you sit at the office all day, then you get in your car and you drive home, right? And then you have dinner and then maybe you go work out for an hour or even hour and a half or so at the gym. Well, guess what? That's actually sadly not enough. And again, don't get me wrong, like it's more important to stay active throughout the day than it is to incorporate a specific workout. And so one of the things that I remind people of is your workout is designed to make you a better athlete. And I know you're not a competitive athlete, but you're a life athlete. It's about being an athlete in your world, right? In your life. And the workout is going to, you know, increase your quality of life, more muscular, less body fat. It's going to help improve your health, your strength levels, your endurance, right? Your posture, etc. But what's really critical for your health is what you do the rest of the day, right? It's not sitting, it's trying to park the furthest at the store and walk in. It's not taking the elevator or the escalator, taking the stairs when you can, because what the research shows is that when we sit for longer than 30 minutes, and we've probably been sitting longer than 30 minutes right now,
Mhm.
our body thinks that we're sleeping essentially because
Yeah.
we haven't evolved yet to the point where we can just sit, right? Our we are we haven't evolved past to the point where we need to be concerned about predators and then finding our next meal. Okay. That's a constant battle all day long. And as far as the sun is up, that is that time that we're going to use to prevent ourselves from being killed and to get food, right? Water, and all those other necessities that we need. We have not evolved past that. So our bodies are designed to work all day long and then rest at night when it's safe. And so what I've created is what's called the 30-60 rule. So every 30 minutes that you're sitting at your desk or sitting watching television, you get up and do 60 seconds of activity. It can be anything like stretching, jumping jacks, push ups, sit ups, because what that's going to do is it's going to keep those genes turned on. When I was talking about the research, it shows once you've been sitting for 30 minutes or longer, your body thinks you're sleeping. And now genes that control fat burning and glucose regulation get turned off because the body thinks you're resting. You're now in storage mode. We don't need to burn fat and carbs. We need to start storing them. And so it starts turning on genes that help to store body fat while you're sitting. And so, like I said, the 30-60 rule is to keep you active throughout the day, right? If you're sitting for 30 minutes or longer, just get up, just stand up, do some stretching. You can do jumping jacks, anything. Walk to the water cooler at your office, whatever it is, just move. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be running. It doesn't have to be strength training. It could just be stretching or walking for at least 60 seconds. And that'll help to keep those genes turned on so that your body doesn't think you're asleep. In I've got feedback from people who did nothing. They didn't start a workout program. They didn't change their diet. They simply just incorporated the 30-60 rule, and they've lost like 40, 50, 60 pounds just
Wow.
doing that. Just doing that.
I've never heard it explained so well of why we should be moving. I have movement goals for my clients. I talk about them setting a reminder on their phones and get up and move around, the walking pads, parking further, but I've never heard that explanation of the genes. And I think that's really helpful because sometimes when people understand the why, I find
Right.
they're more likely to do it.
They're more motivated to do something about it when they understand the why. I say sitting is the new smoking, if you will.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I see it a lot, especially with women that they drive to it, they're not working from home. They're in an office and they feel like they can't get up and move around. I said, do some calf raises, just
Yes.
stand
Yep.
up,
Just
stretch,
exactly. Walk to the
anything.
water cooler. Go to the bathroom. Even if you don't have to go, just walk to the walk to the bathroom. If you want to make sure nobody's wondering what the heck you're doing, go wash your hands or whatever. But just get up and move.
Ah, such good advice and explained so well. Thank you, Dr. Stoppani. I so appreciate you being on the show. And now, how can our listeners find you?
Oh, you can find me on pretty much every social media. The main ones. What do we have? Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, even X, formerly known as Twitter, and my website is just jimstopani.com.
Okay, I'll make sure that all of this is in the show notes, Dr. Stoppani. And thank you again. This has been fabulous. I've enjoyed our
Oh,
conversation.
my pleasure, Carol. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.
Bye.